The Royal Proclamation of 1763.
Harriet Nahanee. She was 71 years old, asthmatic, and crippled by flu. Her hearing was so bad that she often didn't know what was going on in court. But it gave her an excuse to sit next to her close friend and ally, Betty Krawczyk, who was happy to spend the day leaning over to explain to Harriet Nahanee what the judge was saying. Betty, Harriet, and 15 other people were in the BC Provincial Courthouse facing charges of criminal contempt for their refusal to obey a court order which prohibited anyone from interfering with the construction or occupying specific areas generally known as the Eagleridge Bluffs. The Eagleridge protesters were convinced that the environmental impact study approving the demolition of the bluffs had been a rubber stamp process to rush through the highway expansion for the upcoming Vancouver Whistler Winter Olympics.
If they want to declare war and arrest us, well, we have to face that.
Are you prepared to go to jail?
Yes.
Are you prepared to have those people arrested?
I hope not. My hope is that there will be no arrests.
It has not been abridged, it has not been ceded, and this still stands. This is Squamish land, and Harriet is claiming this land. This Eagleridge Bluffs for her children and grandchildren. Woo-hoo! And I'm with Harriet.
So are we. I myself and all of my guests plead sovereign immunity, and because you have no jurisdiction to arrest me, you have no jurisdiction to arrest them.
Long live Eagleridge Bluffs!
Out of the 17 individuals facing charges,
I plead sovereign immunity.
only Harriet and Betty followed through on with the group's publicized commitment that they would go to jail rather than allow construction to start.
He went in a run.
Their allies had quickly folded when they ended up in court in March 2006, offering up apologies that acknowledged that they were wrong and promised not to go anywhere near the Eagleridge Bluff.
Okay, yep.
It wasn't just age and a shared political viewpoint that explained their friendship, nor was it that Harriet and Betty were a generation older than the 15 other people arrested for criminal contempt. Betty had buried her daughter, and Harriet had outlived 3 of her children. Having each survived the loss of a child, there was nothing the court could do that would truly hurt them more.
I couldn't not pray for the trees, the animals that depend on that area. In our culture, we think about our future generations, and that's what I do.
We are using the Royal Proclamation, which says, no treaty, no jurisdiction.
When Harriet was arrested, she carried a copy of Britain's Royal Proclamation of 1763 in one hand. Britain's King George III signed the Royal Proclamation to placate his First Nations allies who had fought with Britain against France during the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763. Canada's First Nations were threatening to fight against the establishment of more British colonies. The Royal Proclamation between sovereign nations put an end to the private purchase of native lands by colonists and established that Canada's Aboriginal people had formal legal title to their land.
This is our hunting grounds. This is our territory. Sovereign immunity.
In Harriet's other hand, she held the Mohawk warriors' flag. In the summer of 1990, the flag had become synonymous with Native resistance when the proposed expansion of a golf course escalated into an armed standoff between members of the Mohawk Warrior Society and the Canadian Army. The Mohawks' claim to the disputed land went as far back as the early 1700s, when Francis King Louis XV gave the land to Catholic missionaries who sold off timber and farms to white settlers. The Connecticut Mohawks had watched their land slowly get parceled and sold. The land in question contained their traditional cemetery and a pine forest that had been planted by their ancestors. It didn't matter to Canada's First Nations whether the Mohawks won or lost. Somebody had drawn a line and fought back.
I'm supposed to hide behind Harriet, aren't I?
Well, we're going to stand. Harriet's going to speak first.
So it wasn't surprising that from the start, Harriet had refused to recognize that the provincial court had any authority over her. It might have been a bit of a street theater, and though she was using the events to draw attention to the issue of unresolved land claims in British Columbia, Harriet was sincere in her lack of respect for the courts and government in Canada.
Sovereign immunity.
Like most of her generation, Harriet was physically taken from her family. And starting from 1945, Harriet spent 5 years in Port Alberni's United Church Residential School, where they were always pitting us up against each other, getting us to fight and molest one another. It was all designed to split us up and brainwash us so that we would forget that we were keepers of the land. The Creator gave our people the job of protecting the land, the fish, the forests. That was our purpose for being alive. But the whites wanted it all, and the residential schools were there to see that they got it. And it worked out. We've forgotten our sacred task. And now that whites have most of the land and have taken all the fish and the trees, most of us are in poverty, addictions, family violence. And it all started in the schools where we were brainwashed to hate our own culture and to hate ourselves so that we would lose everything. Harriet was haunted by one incident in particular.
The day before Christmas, I was crying in the playroom, and I heard yelling, and I went to the bottom of the stairs, and Maisie was standing about a couple of steps down, and he kicked her in the stomach, and she came flying downstairs. Well, I never ever seen her again.
Now the RCMP are claiming Maisie died of pneumonia, but I saw her killed.
We don't care if they should jail us.
Harriet didn't disrespect the law. She simply had to respect for how it was selectively implemented. In British Columbia, she would never understand or be able to accept how a child could be killed and no one held accountable. When it came time for sentencing, Madam Justice Brown of the BC Supreme Court singled out Harriet for particular attention. Mrs. Nahanee demonstrated no remorse and did not apologize for her conduct. She was one of the most prominent and public contenders. In Canada jail is the only case for where there is no other choice available, particularly when the offender is Aboriginal. The idea is taken seriously enough that it's even in the Canadian Criminal Code. Section 718.2e states that a reasonable in the circumstances should be considered for all offenders, with particular attention to the circumstances of Aboriginal offenders. Practically deaf and seriously ill was obviously no visible threat to anyone or anything, and that's why everyone in the courtroom was shocked when Madam Justice Brown announced that I will sentence her to 14 days. She justified her decision by pointing out that Harriet Nahanee, of course, made submissions regarding an appropriate sanction. Harriet might not have made any submissions, but almost a month earlier, Betty Krawczyk had, when she hand-delivered a letter to Justice Brown, pointing out that Harriet was quite ill and that all she wanted to do was to have the 1763 proclamation read out loud. 3 days after she was released from jail, Harriet entered Vancouver's St. Paul's Hospital. On February the 24th, 2007, 1 month to the day after she was sentenced, Harriet Nahanee died of pneumonia.
A lot of people didn't like what she had to say because she spoke the truth, and the truth scared these people.
RCMP were formed to kill Indians, to make way for the Christians. That is still their agenda.
Sing wah-ee-ah-oh, ee-ah-oh, ee-ah-oh. 2 weeks in jail, bail and frail, the inmates pushed and jeered, but the old lady stood her ground. Sing wah-ee-ah-oh, ee-ah-oh, ee-ah-oh. No wonder why she never trusted the white man's lie. No wonder why. She did her time, went back to the line, but now something else was wrong. She checked herself in, expecting to